James and Baby Love on ABC Mid-North Coast. Brecky, time for news, 7:30.
Chance of a late storm this morning. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC News. A Coffs Coast LGBTQIA+ support group says families remain worried about the federal government's religious discrimination bill. The bill passed the House of Representatives along with amendments to protect gay and transgender children from discrimination by religious schools. But the government ran out of time to debate the bill in the Senate yesterday, and the legislation has been put on hold. The coordinator of PFLAG Coffs Coast, Samantha Dawson, says the shelving of the bill is a good outcome, but families are worried about the fallout from the legislation if it's passed in future.
It's just that whole fear of that discrimination and that's going to hold them back. So it is really relevant to them at the moment, and they are worried and concerned, and they just want that protection for their children.
A Port Macquarie Youth Mental Health Service says the debate around the religious discrimination bill will have a detrimental effects. Port Macquarie Headspace clinical lead Alex Harris says about 46% of people accessing their services are LGBTQIA+ or questioning their identity. He says the attention the bill has created prompts stress and anxiety for young people.
Regardless of any conversation that is had or the politics that happens from it, I think that any kind of conversation that occurs like this oftentimes stirs up a greater amount of discrimination and kind of hate speech and homophobia against LGBTQIA+ young people.
A 44-year-old man charged over a 7-hour siege in South Kempsey will face court today. Police were called to Middleton Street in the early hours of yesterday morning following reports of a domestic incident. The man was allegedly armed with a gun. He was arrested and charged and refused bail. A 38-year-old woman who was inside the property was not injured. The owner of Clarence Valley newspaper says ongoing behind a paywall would jeopardise the already decimated regional newspaper business. The comment comes after the federal government's Standing Committee on Communications and the Arts heard that regional news needs to go behind a paywall in order to thrive. But the owner of the Clarence Valley Independent, Anne Mazzatelli, says going to a subscription model would see many readers choose larger outlets.
You put these papers behind paywalls, people just don't go there. And you think about who's reading newspapers these days, it's the over 45s, over 50s. You're not going to get too many people that will go and pay.
10 communities on the Mid-North Coast are being asked to provide details about their properties to help emergency services respond to future natural disasters. The Boban School of Arts Hall Committee has developed the Fire Ready program, which aims to collate customised information about water supplies, hazards and other aspects of rural properties for first responders. The Boban Hall Committee's Mark O'Brien says the initiative came about after firefighters experienced some difficulties while battling fires in 2019.
These guys arrived here in the middle of the night in the dark, having never been here before. It was very difficult for them to know where the resources such as water were, to identify the best entrance to a property that they may have noticed is about to go up.
In news elsewhere, new data shows nearly 30,000 Australians were caught flouting COVID-19 rules in 2020 to 2021. Figures released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics show 29,218 Australians breached public health orders in the 12 months to July 2021. Lee Sales has announced she will leave the ABC's 7:30 program after nearly 12 years. Sales will step down in June and says she feels the end of the federal election cycle will make a good stopping point. And four-time Olympian Scotty James and debutante Valentino Gazzelli will compete in today's final of the men's half-pipe at the Beijing Winter Olympics. To weather now, a partly cloudy day across the region today with possible showers and the chance of a thunderstorm. A strong wind warning is in place for the Coffs Coast. A top today of 28 in Coffs Harbour, 29 in Kempsey and 28 degrees in Port Macquarie, Taree and Foster. To hear today's local news, search online for ABC Local and look for your local station.
We have the support of the health service to do that, and as we move forward. And I know they're working very hard on trying to, retain and encourage staff to come to country areas, but it is a statewide issue, staffing, I do believe. So I think it's probably an Australia-wide issue when you see the advertisement for staff around Australia. So it's a very welcome move, though, that we have a facility that we can actually move forward with. And I think co-location of services that are important to the community, like pathology and ambulance service, is probably a great move. And the removal of the old nurses' home, which will add value to the campus rather than being an eyesore.
Elizabeth, good to talk to you on this today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and we thank Mr Marshall very much for going in on behalf of the Glen Innes community to actually get that additional funding to hopefully take us into the next few decades for healthcare in Glen Innes.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That is Elizabeth McCarthy there with the Glen Innes Hospital Auxiliary. Would love to hear your reaction to this too. It's news time. ABC News for New England Northwest. Good morning, I'm Kemi Maguire. Irrigator groups have rejected calls for the state government to withdraw its regulations designed to licence and measure floodplain harvesting. The regulations are due to come into effect on Monday, but independent MLC Justin Field says they're almost identical to those which the Parliament disallowed last year. Sarah Lewine from the Guido Valley Irrigators Association says the regulations are an essential part of the process to cap the controversial form of water take.
They enable the issuing of licences. They don't determine how those licences are managed or when access starts. All they do is provide a framework to give a licence to an irrigator of which they have to be compliant to and how to measure that.
Work has begun on a controversial dam development in the state's New England region. Xanthi Gregory reports. The first shovel has hit the ground, building a new pipeline which will connect a not yet built Dungowan Dam to Tamworth. The Deputy Prime Minister and local member Barnaby Joyce visited the site yesterday, saying the works will create 70 jobs for the region. However, the dam has received backlash from the public, with project costs, water capacity and price for the water not yet revealed, despite a business case being finalised last week. Developers say works will continue on the 55-kilometre stretch of pipe until 2023. The state government is adding an extra $30 million towards the redevelopment of the Glen Innes Hospital, more than doubling its budget. Northern Tablelands MP Adam Marshall says the boost means not only refurbishing the building, but creating a new hospital for the area, along with extra beds, extra rooms, a new ambulance station and GP clinics could be part of the plan, which is being discussed next month. Mr Marshall says the project is also aiming to attract more staff to the region.
Everyone knows the terrible difficulty in attracting and retaining general practitioners to Glen Innes in particular, and we also know that infrastructure alone is not a silver bullet, but it is certainly one of the factors that we can use to try and attract more medical professionals.
The Sydney Swans AFL club will be featuring their first women's team in next year's season, which may include a local flavour. Alice Mitchell from the Gunnedah Bulldogs and Gabby Mooney from the Inverell Saints have been selected to play in a 5-week summer series, which will lead into pre-selections for the 2023 team. Swans Academy leader Chris Smith says AFLW's ever-growing popularity has created a large talent pool.
We're not here to waste time and just to give people opportunities for the sake of it. The girls who have been selected is because they deserve the opportunity. They've been playing at the level, and because we actually think they've got the qualities to go on and be potential AFL women's players entering into a national competition. So, the challenge is there.
Regional New South Wales could be a launching site for new technologies to be marketed around the world under the state's Research and Development Roadmap. The 20-year plan, which is being finalised, will help the government determine how it spends about $300 million each year. The state's chief scientist and engineer, Professor Hugh Durrant-White, says the agriculture, forestry and environmental sectors are already leading the way.
I know a bunch of companies in New South Wales that got over $200 million of venture funding last year for digital agriculture. That is the production of digital tools, sensing technologies, data analytics to improve crop yields, to manage farms, to manage communications.
The heat is expected to break towards the end of this week for the region. Slight chance of showers are expected on the northern tablelands and northwest slopes and plains. Chance of a thunderstorm this evening is also expected towards Tamworth and Armidale. Winds also picking up to 30 kilometres per hour. Tamworth heading for a top of 32 today, Moree 36, Narrabri 35, Inverell heading for a top of 31, 26 in Glen Innes and 25 in Armidale. For news anytime, search for ABC Local and select your region.
Pretty heartbroken with how they performed. One of them describing his performance in a word I won't repeat, and another who was crying, and you really feel for them. It's tough to be a winter athlete in Australia, and then you get to the Olympics, and then to feel like you maybe haven't hit your best result is tough.
That's true. Figure skater Brendan Carey was very pleased with his performance, though. I saw him on the news, pretty teary. He wanted to smash his previous Olympic records, and he didn't get close to the podium, but
he's wonderful.
He's a fabulous figure skater, and he has beaten his own personal best.
And we will be cheering on Kalani Crane when she comes up in the women's figure skating. That's next week, I believe. We'll be able to see Kalani in action. We'll let you know when we get all the details. Showers around today, partly cloudy. There's the chance of a thunderstorm coming in. 29 for Scone, 26 in Newcastle.
Screaming Jets.
Sammy White. Demi Mitchell.
And Morgan Evans.
ABC Newcastle.
Supporting your local.
Morning, Liz Farquhar with ABC News. Hundreds of people with autism and intellectual disabilities across Australia have had their NDIS funding slashed after they were told it was not value for money. As Bridget Rollison reports, it's forced some parents to quit their jobs to care for their children.
Karen McKenzie's 22-year-old son Jared has autism and severe intellectual disabilities and needs care around the clock. She's had to resign from her job to look after Jared after his funding for carers was cut by half.
We weren't given any explanation other than it's not value for money, which I think is quite appalling.
People with Disability Australia President Samantha Connor says hundreds of families across the country are in the same boat. The federal government says funding for individuals can change based on independent assessments, but insists overall funding for the NDIS has increased by $26 billion over 4 years.
The foreign ministers from Australia, the US, Japan and India will hold a significant meeting in Melbourne today. Stephen Jedgetts reports.
The Quad is shaping up as a vital diplomatic bloc, and all four democracies have signalled they'll collaborate more closely to boost infrastructure investment, increase vaccination rates and shape regional geopolitics. Quad countries insist the group isn't set against China, but all four nations are still determined to limit Beijing's influence. And while today's meeting isn't expected to yield any major new announcements, officials say there's lots of work to be done on pandemic recovery, countering disinformation and regional security.
The Bylong Valley Protection Alliance hopes the High Court's dismissal of an appeal over a proposed Upper Hunter coal mine marks the end of the long legal battle. South Korean company KEPCO has lost its fourth attempt at getting its project's refusal reconsidered. The Environmental Defender's Office says the proponent has exhausted all legal avenues for approval and it would have to submit a new development application. The Alliance's president, Philip Kennedy, says it should sell the land back to local farmers.
There's only a handful of us left in the valley now. There's probably 10 to 15 families displaced when KEPCO started buying up land, and now there's about 6 or 8 of us left in the valley. They've failed to jump a few hoops, and we certainly are excited, but hopefully this is the end.
KEPCO
says it's disappointed by the High Court's decision and is considering its next steps. An energy analyst says there are plenty of new renewable projects on the way to fill the void after the closure of two major power stations in the Hunter Valley. AGL's announced it's bringing forward the closure of the Bayswater power plant near Muswellbrook by 2 years. It's now due to shut in 2033. The nearby Liddell power station is set to close in April next year. Johanna Bowyer from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis says the state government's introducing more energy storage under its electricity roadmap.
That is a plan to put in 12 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 and 2 gigawatts of storage. So there's lots of plans in place to start installing new generation assets.
Prince Charles is isolating after testing positive for COVID-19 and there's some concern for the Queen. Isabella Higgins reports from London.
The heir to the throne is now in self-isolation. Prince Charles's office announced he had tested positive for COVID-19 and wouldn't be able to attend a number of public engagements. Just the night before he was diagnosed, he and the Duchess of Cornwall were mingling with some of Britain's most senior politicians, including the top finance minister and the Home Secretary. A Buckingham Palace source revealed he had recently been in contact with his 95-year-old mother. The source says the Queen is not showing any symptoms but will be monitored closely.
Two Australian snowboarders will compete in today's final of the men's halfpipe at the Beijing Winter Olympics. Tracy Holmes reports.
Four-time Olympians Scotty James and debutant Valentino Gaselli qualified inside the top 5 for today's final. James finished with a bronze in Pyeongchang 4 years ago and is widely tipped to medal again. Gaselli has shown he can match it with more experienced opponents. Competition will be tough with world number 1 and 2 Ayumu and Ruka Hirano from Japan, as well as three-time Olympic champion Shaun White of the USA, all in the mix. Tracy Holmes in Beijing for ABC Sport.
Checking the Hunters weather, partly cloudy today, a high chance of showers and the chance of a thunderstorm, winds south to southeasterly. 26 the expected top for Newcastle today, Maitland headed for 27, Scone a top of 29. It's 21 degrees now in Newcastle, 18 at Scone. ABC News.
Good morning, this is AM, I'm Sabra Lane.
Is heading in. What happens next? Helen O'Neill is taking a look at that in sport after the news.
What do you think of those last 2 days of summer? Pretty impressive, hey? Well, it's going to change a little bit and into the weekend. So, cloudy today after almost no cloud yesterday. High chance of showers and maybe a thunderstorm. We haven't had one of those for a while. Winds south to southeasterly. Still warm enough temperatures to Newcastle, so the coast heading for 26, but further inland, 29 degrees for Singleton and Scone. You're on ABC Newcastle Breakfast with Dan and Jenny.
In 1930, a regional station was a new experience for everyone.
Offering those of you who live in Newcastle and in the Upper Hunter a radio service significantly different from any other currently available to you.
ABC Newcastle, 90 years young.
Good luck to you, 2NC.
Morning, Liz Farquhar with ABC News. Australians aged 16 and over will soon need 3 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to be considered fully vaccinated. Harry Sekulich reports.
The Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation has recommended moving away from the term fully vaccinated. Under the new rules, if it's been longer than 6 months since someone's last vaccine dose and they are eligible for a booster, they will now be considered overdue. Atagi's new advice was endorsed by National Cabinet at a meeting yesterday afternoon, but it will not apply to international travellers arriving in Australia. It will also not apply to Australians under the age of 16 who are not yet eligible for a booster. About 37% of the entire population has received a booster dose.
Inflation has hit a 40-year peak in the US. Consumer prices have jumped 7.5% in the past year to January. Sources of inflation have broadened out to cost of living expenses such as rent, electricity and household items. Truckers protesting against COVID restrictions have blocked a third major border crossing between the US and Canada. North America correspondent Barbara Miller.
A key crossing between the Canadian province of Manitoba and North Dakota is the latest to grind to a halt due to a blockade by opponents of COVID restrictions. Crossings between Alberta and Montana and Detroit and Windsor are also impacted, the latter threatening auto industry supply chains. The protest began in the Canadian capital, Ottawa, but has spread, leading the US Department of Homeland Security to warn copycat actions could impact this weekend's Super Bowl and even Joe Biden's State of the Union address. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
Back home, a South Korean company is being urged to sell back land to Upper Hunter farmers after losing its latest bid to build a coal mine in the Bailong Valley. The High Court has rejected KEPCO's request to have its case for underground and open cut mines heard again. It's had 4 appeals knocked back, and the company says it's taking time to consider its next steps. Local farmer Philip Kennedy says the outcome shows it's neither the time nor the place for a coal mine.
Sell the land back to the mums and dads who once had it. That would be the ultimate utopia, to have it returned back to Australian farmers, the mums and dads who probably the most effective way to farm this country.
The Supreme Court has heard a Central Coast woman allegedly murdered by her older lover was mentally unstable and making threats prior to vanishing in 2012. Giselle Wakatama has the story.
Liesl Smith was 23 when she was last seen leaving her Central Coast home a decade ago. She told people she was pregnant at the time to her older lover, James Scott Church. He's pleaded not guilty to murdering her and burying her in the Upper Hunter Valley. Her body's never been found. In evidence yesterday, Kobe Palmer said Ms Smith was unhinged at the time and threatened to kill her and her horse after years of bad blood between the two. The court previously heard Mr Scott wanted to pursue a relationship with another woman, and Ms Smith had allegedly threatened to burn that woman's house down. The trial is expected to run for up to 8 weeks.
2 clinics have opened in the Hunter Valley to help people dealing with mental health issues related to COVID-19. The Head to Health clinics are now open in Cessnock and Warners Bay after the successful opening of a clinic in Tuggerah last year. The Primary Health Network's Manager of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, Lee Eddy, says the service has a free 1-800 number allowing people to talk to a mental health professional.
Once you're referred to that service, you'll then be provided with free short-term counselling and support, and then further referrals on if there's something else that you might need that hadn't been covered in that initial referral.
To sport, a Newcastle Jets midfielder Angus Thurgate says the playing group has a lot of improving to do as they face a hectic schedule of games to make up for COVID disruptions. The Jets head to Melbourne to play the Victory tomorrow night after losing 4-2 to Melbourne City at home on Tuesday. Thurgate says the team's working on recovering quickly but are staying positive.
It can be a bit challenging, on the body. Some games you might feel not as fresh, but from a mindset point of view, we're not having any impact. We're positive, we're trying to improve, we're trying to get performances together where they're rounded and, we're getting end results at the end.
The Hunters weather, partly cloudy, a high chance of showers today and a possible thunderstorm. 26 the top for Newcastle. Maitland headed for 27, Scone a top of 29. ABC News.
Grants, and Southern Cross University has several other successful candidates as well. Professor Lynn McPherson received a $429,000 grant to investigate strengthening relationships for young people in residential care. Also, there is money to investigate the geochemical record of early human fossils. That was awarded to Associate Professor Reno Joannes Boyo. And also there's another partnership project with the Griffith University looking at early art and culture and occupation along the northern route to Australia. So we'll be looking forward to hearing about those as well. It is coming up to 7:30 and news time. After the news, Steve Simons will join me and we'll meet a young environmentalist who's won a major film award. Good
Morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. 2 more people have died from COVID-19 on the North Coast in the latest reporting period. Miranda Saunders has more.
The Northern New South Wales Local Health Service says there were 370 new cases of COVID-19 reported. 107 were positive PCR tests and 263 were positive rapid antigen tests. A person in their 90s from the Richmond Valley area and a person in their 70s from the Tweed region are the latest locals to die from COVID-19. 23 COVID positive patients are currently in hospitals across the region, and 4 of those patients are in intensive care.
North Coast childcare providers say a government waiver allowing centres to operate with reduced hours is not helpful for most working parents. Figures from the Education Department show more than 1 in 10 centres are obtaining special permission to operate with reduced hours or without a university qualified staff member on duty. Director of the Ocean Shores Preschool, Janelle Rapley, says she knows of several local centres which have sought the waiver, but she says it's no silver bullet.
Because if you've got a mum that works a full-time job or dad that works a full-time job and you can only offer 4 hours, that's obviously not always suitable. So it's still impacting the families regardless of whether your service is operating for the whole day or not.
The Chief Executive of Northern Rivers Childcare Services, Jane Eisenhood, says her staff are feeling overworked and undervalued.
They're on the front line, they're accepting all these families into their services and they get terrible wages. The wages are dreadful. I think we really need to look at wages for our childcare industry.
Local Greens MP Tamara Smith says politicians should not have the final say on how government grants are allocated. 2 projects in her Ballina electorate have been highlighted in a damning Auditor General's report. More than $2.5 million was allocated for upgrades of the Lennox Cultural Centre and the Brunswick Heads Picture House, despite both projects being near the bottom of a list of 152 assessed applications. Ms Smith says the current process is appalling.
You either get showered with gold or you get starved, and Lismore Notice has been starved. They are not showered with gold, and we have been, and it still continues to this day.
The Richmond Valley Council is cautiously welcoming plans for a major solar farm at Myrtle Creek, south of Casino. The project comes with a $1 billion price tag and the capacity to provide power to more than 100,000 homes. The council's manager of economic projects, Mike Perkins, says such an investment would have a significant local economic benefits, but he says it's up to the community to decide if it supports the idea.
If you're looking at the solar farm, a $1 billion investment, the medicinal cannabis creating 300 odd additional jobs, that sort of activity has to increase the vibrancy and activity in an area. Hopefully that will support and also add value to those existing sort of businesses and industries.
The Tweed Mayor is urging the developers behind a new $250 million health and education precinct to consider a different site. A concept plan for the Coogin Connection project was released this week, including a new university campus, aged care facilities, essential worker housing and a private hospital. But Chris Cherry says the area is state significant farmland and there's an obvious alternative.
We have the existing Tweed Hospital site that nobody has decided what to do with yet. So let's look at whether that could be the site where something like this could go. We could have a lot of those elements that are proposed for this site could be included in the existing Tweed Hospital site.
Tweed Shire Council says a baiting program to control wild dogs would be ineffective at this time of year. It's under pressure from local land services after numerous reports by local landholders of stock losses and attacks by wild dogs. But Council Sustainability and Environment Officer Jane Lofthouse says an increase in lace monitor lizard activity over the spring and summer months makes baiting inefficient.
Lace monitors aren't impacted by 1080 baits. They would have to eat a lot of them for it to actually affect them. So it is definitely around, they're targeting foxes and dogs. But it's the fact that we lay baits out, the monitors take them, so therefore they're not actually being effective.
To hear today's local news again, you can search online for ABC North Coast.
They can help you put a plan together. I know they were invaluable during the drought. But you can pop onto their website and get all information for that. So that's RFCSNR, which is the initials for Rural Financial Counselling Service Northern Region, and it's .org.au. And if in doubt, give me a call and I can text you the links or send you out a special disaster grant set of guidelines.
Fantastic. Always very helpful, Maria. We certainly appreciate your time again this Friday morning.
Thank you, Millie.
Thank you, Maria Cameron there, bringing you what's happening around the Maryborough-Cassilis region, and also, a very timely reminder around those grants as well. It's doesn't feel like, 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago, that we were seeing flooding around our region, but help still there if you need it.
Ask me what you know is true. Don't have to tell you I love your precious heart. I was standing, you were there. Two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. We could live for 1,000 years, but if I hurt you, I'll make wine from your tears. I told you that we could fly, 'cause we all have wings, but some of us don't know why. I was standing, you were there. Two worlds collided, and they could never, ever tear us apart. I was standing, you were there. Two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. You were standing, I was there. Two worlds collided.
In Excess, Never Tear Us Apart from 1987. Great to be with you this Friday morning on ABC Upper Hunter. You'll be hearing in the news today, we've changed the label. If you're fully vaccinated or triple vaxxed, you're now up to date. If it's been more than 6 months since your second shot and you haven't got that booster yet, you'll have a different label. And the Coronacast team are going to break that all down for us after the 7 o'clock news. Hope you can stay with us after that. Right now, though, it is news time. It's 7 o'clock.
Families devastated as NDIS funding is slashed. Koalas move on to the endangered list, and the Hunter Valley's forgotten ex-servicemen and women to be honoured. Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. I'm Liz Farquhar with ABC News. Disability advocates have accused the federal government of targeting people with autism and intellectual disabilities after hundreds of families had their National Disability Insurance Scheme funding cut. Bridget Rollison has more.
People with Disabilities Australia President Samantha Connor says their organisation has been overwhelmed by reports from parents of NDIS payments being slashed in recent months.
Predominantly people who are autistic, people with intellectual disability and people with psychosocial disability seem to be the areas that are being most targeted right now.
Mother of 8-year-old Max Drew, who has autism, says she can't afford to send him to sports therapy anymore after his funding was cut by 40%.
He's just not going to reach his full potential without their funds.
The federal government says while some individual NDIS funding plans can change, average payments across the board increased last year.
Foreign ministers from Australia, the US, Japan and India will gather in Melbourne today for a significant regional meeting. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
The meeting of the Quad foreign ministers is another sign that all four countries want to cooperate more closely across a range of fronts, from security to vaccines and infrastructure. The four ministers are expected to discuss countering disinformation, pandemic recovery and shared concerns about China's actions in the region. Today's meeting isn't expected to yield any major new announcements, but officials say they're working on implementing the group's existing commitments, particularly on ramping up vaccine distribution.
The federal government will upgrade the protection status of koalas from vulnerable to endangered. The listing will apply in New South Wales, Queensland and the ACT and follows a commitment of $50 million for the protection and conservation of koalas. Environment Minister Susan Lee says the government's working to address the impacts of climate change and land clearing on koalas.
We do look at developments and we do assess them and make necessary offsets for koala habitat. But we're already doing quite a bit of work in this area. This has been going for a long time now and it's ramped up, as I said, since the fires.
The Bylong Valley Protection Alliance hopes the High Court's dismissal of an appeal over a proposed Upper Hunter coal mine marks the end of the legal battle. South Korean company KEPCO has lost its fourth attempt at getting its project's refusal reconsidered. The Environmental Defender's Office says the proponent has exhausted all legal avenues for approval and it would have to submit a new development application. The Alliance's president, Philip Kennedy, says the company should sell the land back to local farmers.
There's only a handful of us left in the valley now. The others, probably 10 to 15 families displaced when KEPCO started buying up land, and now there's about 6 or 8 of us left in the valley. You know, they've failed to jump a few hoops, and we certainly are excited, but hopefully this is the end.
KEPCO says it's disappointed by the High Court's decision and is considering its next steps. An energy analyst says companies are likely to continue speeding up the closure of coal-fired power stations. AGL has announced it's aiming to shut its Bayswater power plant near Muswellbrook by 2033 instead of 2035. Johanna Boyev from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis says Bayswater might close even sooner once more renewable energy sources are up and running.
That is a plan to put in 12 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 and 2 gigawatts of storage. So there's lots of plans in place to start installing new generation assets to replace these exiting aging generators.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has announced plans to heavily invest in nuclear power and renewables, such as solar and wind, to make the country carbon neutral by 2050. He wants at least 6 new nuclear reactors built, the first expected to be in use by 2035. Surging energy prices and concerns about Europe's reliance on imported Russian gas have also persuaded French officials of the region's need for more energy independence. A third SAS witness is expected to be called to a Sydney court today in the defamation trial of decorated war veteran Ben Roberts-Smith. Jamie McKinnell reports.
Ben Roberts-Smith is suing 3 newspapers and journalists over allegations of unlawful killings, domestic violence and bullying contained in stories in 2018. Publisher 9 Entertainment is today expected to call a witness anonymised as Person 16, who'll be the third person from the SAS to give evidence in the federal court. court. In court documents, person 16 is mentioned as being present for a November 2012 vehicle stop in Afghanistan, during which an Afghan teenager was later allegedly shot dead. Mr. Robert Smith has denied all of the allegations.
New data has found that Australian women on average earn almost $26,000 a year less than men. The study from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency is based on the pay of more than 4 million employees across Australia between April 2020 and March 2021. Men are also twice as likely as women to be in the top earnings quartile, which is earnings of $120,000 and above. And women are 50% more likely than men to be in the bottom earning quartile of $60,000 and less. An innovative push to attract new businesses to Newcastle has seen 30 entrepreneurs, some from overseas and capital cities, to set up shop. The City Council established a $300,000 grants fund for the program. Deputy Mayor Declan Clausen says independent modelling suggests the initiative should bring in $25 million in business opportunities.
We saw more than 500 people apply from right around the world, as well as metropolitan regions from across Australia, and really pleased that we've been able to offer 30 grants for people to relocate and move to the city.
A state government grant will see 24 ex-servicemen and women from the Hunter Valley honoured publicly for the first time. The Kersley Community Dawn Service Committee has identified 24 people who served in various conflicts during a research blitz during last year's Delta lockdown. The group's Jordan Fallon says it's important to honour those who've served. He says the committee's been given a small grant to install plaques on remembrance benches for those who haven't been publicly recognised.
What this grant will mean is that they will now be able to be honoured on that World War I bench of remembrance with individual plaques.
The British royal family has been hit with another COVID-19 scare after Prince Charles tested positive. Isabella Higgins reports from London.
Prince Charles has contracted COVID-19 for a second time. His office says he's now in isolation and has cancelled public engagements. Just hours before, he had been mingling at a gala with some of Britain's most senior politicians, including the Home Secretary and the top finance minister. His wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, tested negative and continued with her planned events. A Buckingham Palace source says Prince Charles had recently met up with his 95-year-old mother, but so far the Queen was showing no symptoms and was being closely monitored. This weekend she held a small event to celebrate her Platinum Jubilee.
In a busy day at the Beijing Winter Olympics, 9 Australians will be competing across 5 sports, as Tracy Holmes reports.
Olympic bronze medalist Scotty James and Games debutant Valentino Gazzelli will contest the men's snowboard halfpipe final, while Jackie Narracott will feature in the morning heats of the skeleton. 3-time Olympian Greta Small is in the women's Super G event. Short track speed skater Brendan Corey returns to the arena for the men's 500-metre heats, and the cross-country 15K Classic features Phil Bellingham, Sevi de Campo, Hugo Hinkfuss and Lars Young-Vic.
Now with more sport, here's Jack Snape.
Wicketkeeper batter Josh Inglis will debut for Australia's men's cricket team in tonight's first T20 against Sri Lanka at the SCG. Matthew Wade will keep the gloves and Ben McDermott also comes back into the side as preparations continue for October's Home World Cup. Captain Aaron Finch has backed Inglis to succeed.
Josh Inglis has been someone who has been shuffled around the order a little bit and that's a sign of how well he's played it over the last couple of years.
A seesawing A-League men's soccer match between the Central Coast Mariners and Macarthur Bulls in Gosford has ended in a 3-3 draw. The Australian women's basketball team has beaten Brazil 65 points to 52 in its first match of the World Cup qualification tournament in Serbia. Australia has already qualified for this year's World Cup as hosts, but a good performance in Serbia will ensure the team has a favourable draw in September. And Ben Simmons has been traded to Paddy Mills' NBA team, the Brooklyn Nets, in a massive deal that sends superstar James Harden to Philadelphia.
The Hunters weather, partly cloudy today, a high chance of showers and a possible thunderstorm. Winds south to southeasterly. 26 the top for Newcastle today. Maitland headed for 27. Scone a top of 29. It's 21 degrees now on the coast.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning. Happy Friday. If it is the end of the working week for you, if you're kicking along, it's all with you. You'll get there. It's been a bit of a week, a long year, a long couple of years as we live. That can't be any other voice than Bob Marley, accompanied there by the Wailers. That is One Love. People get ready from 1984 on ABC Upper Hunter. The news is not far away on the other side of that. It was the South Korean company that spent more than $700 million buying up land in the Bylong Valley. It's tried at every turn to get that open-cut mine up and running. In court yesterday, though, the last-ditch bid failed. More on that next.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for live grandstand sport.
Yours for the latest on your local team.
Yours, win, lose or draw.
ABC Upper Hunter.
Morning, Liz Farquhar with ABC Hunter News. A South Korean company is being urged to sell back land to Upper Hunter farmers after losing its latest bid to build a coal mine in the Bylong Valley. The High Court has rejected KEPCO's request to have its case for an underground and open cut mine heard again. It's had 4 appeals knocked back, and the company says it's taking time to consider its next steps. Local farmer Philip Kennedy says the outcome shows it's not the time nor the place for a new coal mine.
Sell the land back to the mums and dads who once had it. That would be the ultimate utopia, to have it returned back to Australian farmers, the mums and dads who probably the most effective way to farm this country.
An energy analyst says there are plenty of new renewable projects on the way to fill the void after the closure of 2 major power stations in the Hunter Valley. AGL has announced it's speeding up the closure of the Bayswater power plant near Muswellbrook. It was due to shut by 2035, but the company has brought forward the cut-off date by 2 years. The nearby Liddell power station is also set to close in April next year. Johanna Boyer from the Institute for Energy Economic and Financial Analysis says the state government is introducing more energy storage under its electricity roadmap.
That is a plan to put in 12 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 and 2 gigawatts of storage. So there's lots of plans in place to start installing new generation assets to replace these exiting ageing generators.
Regional airline Fly Pelican is setting up a maintenance facility in Newcastle, which it says will create up to 15 local jobs. Fly Pelican already has office space and a hangar for several planes at Newcastle Airport, with 50 employees based at the site. A new lease will see maintenance of its 32 aircraft located under the same roof at Newcastle, with local engineers to carry out the work. The mother of a Central Coast woman allegedly murdered has told the Supreme Court she travelled interstate to put up posters to try to find her daughter. Liesl Smith vanished in 2012 and is believed to be buried in the Upper Hunter. Miss Smith's body has never been found, and her ex-boyfriend, James Scott Church, has pleaded not guilty to murder. Sandra Harvey yesterday told the court she put up posters to the north, south, east and west, as well as travelling to Victoria, attaching flyers to trees at truck stops. A small group of veterans from New South Wales Hunter Valley has identified dozens of ex-servicemen and women who haven't been publicly honoured. The Kersley Community Dawn Service Committee near Cessnock says it started a research project to honour those who've served in conflicts from the area. The group has now found more than 170 local men and women, including 24 who they identified during last year's Delta lockdown. The committee's Jordan Fallon says the group's been given a state government grant to install plaques for those people.
We'll give an opportunity for our community to understand and appreciate their stories and experiences that have never been publicly shared or honoured.
The Hunter Central Coast Primary Health Network says 2 new mental health hubs in the region are open to people of all ages. The Head to Health program was developed to support people across New South Wales dealing with mental health issues related to COVID-19. After the successful opening of a clinic in Tuggerah last year, clinics have now opened in Warners Bay and at Cessnock. The network's manager of mental health and suicide prevention, Leah Eddy, says people can call a free 1-800 number and speak with a mental health professional who'll guide them to the support they need, which could include face-to-face counselling.
It's for anybody. You don't have to have a GP referral. You don't have to have a diagnosed mental illness. It's just for anybody who needs a little bit of extra support to cope with life, to cope with your feelings, to cope with the way that the pandemic's impacting your normal day-to-day life.
And in sport, Australian and former Newcastle basketballer Ben Simmons has reportedly been traded from Philadelphia to the Brooklyn Nets as part of a package in exchange for superstar James Harden. Simmons has sat out the season for the 76ers after being unhappy with his treatment following the team's playoff loss last season. The Hunters weather today, partly cloudy, showers and the chance of a thunderstorm, winds south to southeasterly. 26 the expected top for Newcastle today, Maitland headed for 27, Scone a top of 29 degrees. Tomorrow, partly cloudy with more showers on the way. This is ABC News.